Good morning. It's Monday, the 23rd of September, and this is Govindraj Ethiraj, headquartered in broadcasting as well as streaming from Mumbai, India's warming up financial capital. The take: India's whiskey trail is an R&D success story. Surinder Kumar looks and sounds like he works with an IT major in Bangalore, possibly even in a senior position. He hails from Kashmir but speaks English with a slightly clipped South Indian accent, presumably because he studied and lived in and around Bangalore and Mysore for several decades. Except that he works for a different kind of export powerhouse, alcohol, and more specifically whiskey rather than IT services. He's a master distiller and the man behind two major global Indian brands, Amrut and Indri, both single malt brands that have won a series of global awards taking Indian whiskey and spirits onto the global stage. It's often said that India's IT industry grew not because of the government, but in spite of it. Because writing software code did not require the litany of permissions you would need to set up a manufacturing plant or the factory inspections that you had to reckon with, or the hurdles of labor laws and transporting goods through challenged roads and through notoriously slow shipment processes. And before you knew it, the Indian IT industry was turning in billions of dollars of revenue, and then the Y2K moment arrived in 2000 and it took off. And the rest is history and is still playing out. Something similar, though much smaller, has happened with India's spirits industry, though with many more physical restrictions. Go to a party in India and people would rather sip Indian or more specifically Goan gins rather than the classic British brands. When it comes to whiskey, people ask for Amrut, Paul John or Indri, both in India and overseas. NRIs seem to like Indri and Amrut because it's Indian and it's good. As I can see, while this is a strong Make in India story, the government itself has not had much of a role in it and perhaps can't. One of the things, by the way, that's worked is that entrepreneurs have figured out that conditions in India for making world-class spirits were actually good. Surinder Kumar, for example, said in an interview that the northern plains of India, where Indri is matured, temperatures oscillate between 0 in winter and 50 degrees Celsius in summer, with just 2 months of rain and 10 months of dry weather. Now, this extreme temperature makes the pores of the wood, where it's stored, open up and contract exponentially, making the interaction between the wood and whiskey much more pronounced, thus imparting far more flavor to the liquid in a shorter period of time. In maturation, he says, you have to apply the rule of 3, that is 1 year in India equals 3 years in Scotland, according to an interview with Forbes India. Who would have thought that? It's a similar story in gins. Stranger & Sons from Goa has been ranked in the top 8 gins in the world with a gold outstanding medal at the IWSC, that's the International Wines and Spirits Competition, in 2020. Hapusa got the gold at the same competition in 2021, and Jaisalmer won a gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition 2023. Tamras Gin won the gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition 2022. Understandably, you're not likely to see gin and whiskey entrepreneurs sharing the stage with the kind of mostly tech entrepreneurs feted at various media house award ceremonies, except maybe a beer company or two. Nor will you see ministers in government consorting with such, or rather these folks here. Again, all of this is understandable because it's, at the end of the day, alcohol. But the success of Indian spirits holds a larger lesson. First, that in our quest to be a product nation, we must remember that these are equally globally recognized and awarded products made in India. Moreover, not only are exports booming, but overseas spirits majors are trying to replicate this Indian success story. And when I say overseas, I mean really the big ones. The International Spirits and Wines Association of India, ISWAI, says exports have seen a big surge with a 16% increase in volume and a 20% increase in value in the last year. Now, this is something that cannot be matched by too many industries. Of course, again, this is a small one. Moreover, the industry, which is overall worth close to $52 billion in India, employs close to 8 million individuals directly or indirectly. Of course, there is considerable domestic consumption, and that's what spurs the market in many ways. But the success of these brands also reflects the strength of research and development in the spirits industry. You cannot be creating strong brands like these unless you had good R&D here in Haryana or Goa and a culture of R&D. And remember, R&D is a holy grail of sorts for India's manufacturing industry. Finally, Surinder Kumar studied food technology from the Central Food Technological Research Institute, or the CFTRI, in Mysore, widely recognized as a premier institution for food technology in this part of the world. In another interview, he talked of how he joined a company called Central Distilleries, now part of United Spirits, as part of campus interviews. He also said that the CFTRI provided him the extensive knowledge base and a range of skills in beverage production. It struck me, with 23 Indian Institutes of Technology or IITs and 21 Indian Institute of Management or IIMs, surely we could set up another CFTRI which produces and nurtures world-class talent for R&D in food and beverages, areas where Indians are clearly excelling. And that brings us to the top stories and themes. The stock markets deliver a Friday bumper, could resume steady climb on Monday. India is the second best performing stock market in the world. The rupee is strong and hits a 2-month high. And finally, what do India's youngsters really want? The outcome of an exhaustive survey.
This is the Core Report with Govindraj Ethiraj.
A bumper Friday for the stock markets. With the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates by 0.5%, the taps are opening up again. Foreign investors have already pumped in close to 76,000 crores this year, with some 33,000 crores coming in just the first 3 weeks of this month. So the liquidity flows are looking good, almost too good actually, and thus a little worrisome. On Friday, the BSE sensex was up about 1,359 points to close at an all-time high of 84,544 on Friday, that is. The NSE Nifty was up about 375 points to close at a record 25,790. If you think about it, the 100,000 mark, which people talked about almost as a distant dream, is now actually looking much closer. In the week, the Sensex was up about 1,653 points, or close to 2%, and the Nifty was up about 434 points, or close to 1.7%. Remember, when I talked about 100,000 Sensex, that is not to suggest it will happen right now, but it's just that we are much closer to that figure than we were much earlier. Meanwhile, oil is quoting around $75 a barrel and is likely to stay in that region or rise unless there are some serious demand concerns. Remember, tensions in the Middle East, as is evident, are rising steadily at this point. India is the second best stock market. Now, the NSE Nifty 50 and the S&P BSE Sensex are trailing only Wall Street's Nasdaq and S&P 500 as the top-performing indices this year, with analysts expecting the rally to extend into 2025, according to Reuters. The Nifty and Sensex have gained about 18.7 or close to 19% and 17% so far in 2024, making them the third and fourth spots amongst major global stock exchanges. The Nasdaq and S&P have grown about 22 and about 20.5%, slightly ahead of the Nifty and Sensex. Japan's Nikkei 225 and Germany's DAX follow India, or rather just behind India, at about 13% and 12%. Foreign portfolio inflows, which had moderated in August, are on course to hit a 6-month high in September, being those figures we just spoke of. On the other hand, the rally has pushed the 12-month forward price-to-earnings ratio of the Sensex and Nifty to about 23.6 and 24.4. Now, this is the highest amongst emerging markets, according to Reuters, which also adds that technical indicators are now showing that both indices are in overbought territory. So what's driven this longer rally? Well, it's primarily realty, autos, public sector enterprises, pharmaceuticals, and energy, which in turn have been driven by domestic institutional investors who've bought shares worth about 323,000 crores or 3.23 trillion rupees since the start of the year. And mutual funds, of course, have remained net buyers since February 2021. That's more than 3 years at a stretch, with contributions coming from you and me, mostly in the form of systematic investment plans, which in turn have hit record highs for 14 months in a row. Reuters quoted analysts at Jefferies, the stockbroker, saying that the combined domestic inflows through mutual funds, direct participation, insurance, and pensions funds are unsustainably high at about $7.5 billion per month between January and August. And they were thus cautious in the near term on markets, small caps and mid caps. Actually, everyone is cautious, but in some ways perhaps doesn't know what to do. Gold is up again. We spoke of gold prices on Friday morning and shared a somewhat bullish outlook from commodities broker Ajay Kedia. On Friday, gold was up and above the $2,600 level for the first time, building on a rally triggered by the interest rate cuts and rising Middle East tensions. Remember, when there are tensions, people migrate or navigate towards gold, which is considered a safe haven asset. Spot gold was up at about $2,620 per ounce midday, according to Reuters. The rupee rises too. The Indian rupee has risen for the fifth straight session on Friday Thanks to a general surge in Asian currencies as well as the potential of greater inflows from overseas, which we've touched upon a little earlier, the rupee closed at 83 rupees 56 paise against the US dollar, up from its close of 83 rupees 68 paise in the previous session. Remember, the rupee does move in a narrow range and is managed in that form. The rupee has hit a more than 2-month high of 83 rupees 48 paise earlier on Friday, and gained about 0.4% week on week, its strongly weekly rise this year, according to Reuters, who also pointed out that overseas investors have bought more than $7 billion of Indian debt and equities so far in September. The earlier figure I gave you was only equities. And this, in turn, is the highest monthly inflow since December 2023, according to Reuters once again. What do India's youth really want? Brand and business strategy consultant Harish Bijoor recently wrote an article about an encounter and chance conversation with a brother-sister teenager duo on a Mumbai-Bangalore flight. He asked both of them what their ambitions were, as directly as that. One said she wanted to be a fashion blogger, and the other said he wanted to be a radio jockey and was already working on how to go about it. This led Bijoor, among other things, to work on an extensive research project for an edtech company where he surveyed about 14,650 youngsters between 10 and 14 years of age to understand what they sought from, well, life. Bijoor says New India and the New Indian are divided in ambition. While urban folk by and large are now experimenting with ambition that's less solid in its intent than ever before, rural Indians have embraced ambitions that exclusively belonged to the Gen Y and Gen Z folks of urban India. Broadly, Bijoor says 87% of those he met indicated a desire to be in the services part of the economy, and an explanation for that is coming up, while 12% want to be in the manufacturing space. The verdict is actually clear in urban India. This space wants to be in services, which is glamorous, ubiquitous, customer-centric, front-ended, and seems to exhibit the ability to earn money and margins irrational to effort as opposed to the other two sectors. The key ambitions are to be an influencer, blogger, television anchor, retail person, and in e-commerce, digital marketing, 5G, 6G technology development, and the most obvious one, an artificial intelligence or machine language developer. Cluster 2 folks in the rural markets are a whole bit different. They are, says Bijoor, getting aggressively educated and want to move away from what their parents have been doing. In this set, 41% want to be in services, but the services they talk about are a little different from the urban folk. For them, banking, information technology-enabled services, and civil services, starting with the IPS, and then medicine and engineering are big hits, so is teaching. Some want to be in agriculture, but even there, the desire is to be in spaces away from the food crops cultivated by their parents. Horticulture, sericulture, prawn farming, and even windmills to harvest energy are the spaces being talked about, so you can see the climate tilt. The folks in deep rural markets are the ones who are talking about the future in a rather futuristic manner. Many want to do better at what their fathers and grandfathers have been doing. They speak of natural agriculture, and they're also talking about studying the sciences. I spoke with Bijoor in some detail about the survey, what triggered it, and the key findings for him and the insights that he could take away for all of us.
This is a complete study of the alpha generation, as we call it, which is just about the emerging generation. Anybody born from 2010 upwards, right up to now. This is likely to be the single largest living generation as on 31st December 2025. And 2025 is not far away. And so in came an EdTech major. And this EdTech major is very concerned about India because, it is one of the biggest clusters that we're going to have. And the most relevant segment seems to be the Alpha Gen. So we went in and tried to look at the ambitions of New India. Ambitions were studied across 3 different clusters. The first cluster, which I call urban. Urban, in the old days, we used to call it urban plus rural, as tier 2 towns. I do believe there's nothing called tier 2 towns anymore. There's just one big urban cluster. So cluster 1 is urban. Cluster 2 is rural, as we knew it in the past. And cluster 3 is a new definition that I bring to the party, which is called deep rural. Very distant places where I keep saying, where you and I haven't been to as yet. So total sample size, 14,650. And the youngest person met was possibly 10 years old and the oldest was 14. What is their ambition as far as careers are concerned?
Right. And some of it, I don't know, I guess this is the urban bias and the people you meet around. The people you've spoken to, the young people in urban India seem to be saying that they want to be influencers, bloggers, television anchors. But they also want to be in digital marketing and technology development. So what is this telling us?
Okay, this is telling us that there are three Indias. And in each of these Indias, there's a different ambition that the young are articulating. It so happens that in the old days, ambition was a need. Okay. You needed it to survive. Today, I'm saying an ambition is a need. It is also a want. It is a desire. It's an aspiration. And in the case of urban folk, it's even a fantasy. And therefore, urban folk want to do the kind of tasks which are, really wealth creating, which are glamorous, which are front ended, which are reasonably frivolous at times, or hitherto called frivolous. And I think, urban people are very comfortable doing that, including, dabbling in AI and ML and tech of every kind, but very high end tech. The rest of the people seem to be a little more real in terms of the careers. Again, I'm not passing a value judgment, but suffice to say that in rural areas, people are saying that, hey, I want to be in services, but I want to be in banking. I want to be in teaching. I want to be in telecom, stuff like that. So that's the second cluster. And the third cluster, which is deep rural, they seem to be the real people of futuristic India. Okay. And now these are guys who are saying, I want to be in agriculture. And they're saying that, fundamentally, agri is going to attain food security for the nation. Okay. I want to be in green agriculture. That's an ambition. I want to serve in the armed forces, a small number. Okay. Because that's gone out of the window from urban, even rural markets. So deep rural, there's still a yen to want to be with the armed forces. So I think, three different Indias, three different sets of ambitions. And if you total 1 plus 1 plus 1, it's thankfully 3, in the sense that I think it balances out India. Otherwise, India would be lopsided. If every Indian wanted to do what an urban Indian wants to do, I think we'd be very lopsided. And that is the disaster of some of the developed economies of the world, like the United States of America.
And it's interesting because you've classified them as manufacturing and services, or rather services and manufacturing. So all of this, the blogging and the television anchoring and all of that, including, let's say, wanting to be in AI and ML, is services in your definition, and the rest of it is manufacturing. But the overall still seems to be services if you look at the whole 14,650. Am I right?
Oh, yes. And I think it goes with the GDP of this country because, 56% of the GDP emerges out of services as far as India is concerned. But if you look at the three clusters, when I actually triangulate the data, I see one India, which is urban India, which I call services India, which is totally services oriented. The second India is manufacturing and services oriented, which is really rural India. And the third India is the India which is agriculture and manufacturing oriented. So third India, which is deep rural India, is really not into services. They think services are hollow stuff. People have asked, can you eat a telecom service? Can you drink a blog? So I think, wanting to be a blogger and wanting to be an influencer, and these are considered to be not so solid careers for people in real, deep, rural India.
And anything here surprised you, Harish? For example, whether it's rural or urban, some of these choices are very deep. In the urban side, let's say young people, and we're talking about people under 15, talking about doing AI and ML. And in rural, let's say the examples that you've said, talking about agriculture and green energy and so on.
If you look at it, not very surprising because, coding is being taught to kids who are as old as 5 years old, right? In urban India. And, that seems to be the disaster. And therefore, what really happens is you become what you learn and you become what you see and you become what you watch. And I think since you see a lot of it, it's all in the face. I mean, the blobs are in the face. Influencers are in the face. Glamour is in the face. Cricket is in the face. Though not too many people are saying, I want to be a cricketer. Okay, despite that. Bollywood is in the face. Not too many people are saying, I want to be a Bollywood star. Because everybody knows the kind of numbers that actually reach that stratosphere. It's not surprising that urban India is talking this. But what surprises me is deep rural. Deep rural articulating, words such as green, non-technology oriented agriculture, hand-picked crops. Young children talking about hand-picked crops, naturally grown crops. I mean, then without pesticides and fertilizers. Because in Punjab, children came up and said that my granddad is sick, my grandmom is sick, my uncles are all sick, my father is not too well. You know what they're talking about. They're really talking about a relationship of agriculture with pesticide, with productivity, and the wrongdoing of such stuff, which has affected the health of people. And therefore, they're saying, I want to be in clean agriculture. I want to be in green agriculture. I want to be natural. And I want to take care of the food security of the country. This is deep rural Punjab that I'm talking about. Same thing with Haryana. It's a small state. And Tamil Nadu. Oh, Tamil Nadu is big on this. I mean, I think the awareness levels of the young children in Tamil Nadu, I can't call them children, 10 to 14, I think, they're new India. They're going to rule us. We are not going to rule them. And I think it's great to hear these kind of talks coming in.
And you're saying that in Tamil Nadu also children were talking about agriculture in the way, let's say, children in Punjab and Haryana were. Okay.
Oh, yes, very much. In fact, children, I mean, I was stunned when a 14-year-old told me that, hey, there are many crops that we grow. I mean, there's rice, there's paddy. Do you know how much water it takes? So I want to do research in the space to say, how can I grow paddy with less water? Because the world is going to be water challenged. And these are words that come from children who have gone to real deep rural schools. And these are government schools. They have one teacher who takes some 4 classes, 4 different sections. And I think totally they have just 3 teachers in the school. And this is the kind of stuff they're talking about. So I think, plenty of hope for this country.
And how many states did you cover, Harish, in this survey?
Not too many. We have done 14 states because, there was a restriction in how far we could reach. So we clustered them into Northeast, West, South, and Central. And we have not done Jammu and Kashmir. That's out of the ambit. But the Northeast we have touched.
Right. Now, this survey is done presumably from an education lens or what students may desire. Is there any other takeaway for you from whichever way you want to see it?
Yeah. There's plenty out of this, Govind, because, this is giving me ideas for other pieces of research that I can actually go into. Just saying that we know so little of deep rural people. First of all, I don't think anybody understands my definition of deep rural at all. So I am very happily and proudly touting it that somebody called a market urban, somebody defined rural, somebody said rural, but I am defining something called deep rural. And this deep rural is that part of India which is emerging, deep rural emerging. There's something called Desi pride movements out here. I call it Desi revival. I mean, very deep in deep rural, people tend to say, why should my teacher wear trousers to teach to me? A child is asking, okay, not child, 10 to 14-year-old is asking, why cannot my teacher teach in a dhoti? Because teachers are told that they need to be in trousers and shirt, apparently. Why should they wear a bush shirt? So this is a Desi revival to say that, all the Desi things are great things. And in one place, Madurai, the guy popped up and said, this cola is really disturbing the ecosystem quite badly. You know how water, big name company he took, I will not name it. You know how much of water it's drawing out and how much of pollution it's putting back into the ecosystem. Why should all of us not drink our Jigar Thanda? Jigar Thanda, incidentally, Govind, you will know this, is from Madurai. Jigar means liver and Thanda means cooling. It's one of the tastiest, delicious drink that comes out of the gut of Madurai. And I think there's plenty of revival stuff happening.
You're saying some of these trends, including, let's say, awareness about environment, sustainability, and so on, cuts across the entire spectrum, or was it more leaning towards the deep rural, as you said?
It's polarized. In urban, there's a huge degree of sensitivity when it comes to green, ESG goals. People understand ESG goals. And the other end of India, which is deep rural, understands this. And I think, one is out of the fact that, I live amidst it and I know what it is, which is deep rural. Whereas urban says that I've been hit badly by the stuff that's come at me, like in Delhi. Kids are very, very angry about the pollution that they have to breathe in. And I think, people are talking about that. There are places in India, they're talking about water shortage. In Bengaluru, there are people who have been speaking about water problems and day zero as something that's approaching. A 10 to 14-year-old young man, woman, and them understands these things so clearly. I mean, it's very good to hear it. But middle India, rural India is in a state of a flux. Rural India is still bothered, I think, in between the roti, kapda, makan kind of a bridging. It's really doing what urban India used to do in the old days.
Right, Harish, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
That was the core report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in, and thank you once again for listening.